Welcome once again to our weekly live stream. Thanks so much for being with us. Tough subject today. Ebola viruses, cytomegaloviruses, RSV, Epstein-Barr viruses, herpes zoster simplex, bacterium, TB, tuberculosis. Am I going to try to give you a microbiology and an immunology kind of a seminar? No. What I want to do today is to maybe dispel some of the fears that I believe that are out there. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of angst right now. Will this become epidemic? The CDC, some of their literature, I tried to do a little bit of homework last night. Wasn't feeling all that well. I feel a lot better today, praise God. But they're projecting possibly maybe like 1.4 million. I'm not real sure how they're coming to that. So we're going to talk. We'll talk specifically about Ebola initially, but then we want to talk a little bit about generically about all these different viruses and these bacterium. And then I want to draw it back, and we're going to circle the wagon and talk about how you can do some things to literally support your immune system. And do you need to be overcome and struck with fear? And I think the word to that, at least initially, is no, because ultimately, who holds, just as you heard in that song, in that worship song, who holds your future? Who holds your hand? I want to read to you, blessed is the nation. This is out of Psalm 33. Blessed is the nation. I'm just going to insert a word here. You don't ever want to take the scripture out of context, but blessed is the nation. I'm going to say blessed is the people whose God is the Lord. So if you are trusting Him, if you have put your weight down onto Him, I believe that you are in the right stead and you're in a position to receive wisdom and counsel from on high. The people He chose for His inheritance, that's you and I. From heaven the Lord looks down, He sees all of mankind. From His dwelling place He watches all who live on earth. He who forms the hearts of all, who considers everything they do. And then later on we're going to end with this simple message today about who are you waiting on, about in whom are you trusting, and ultimately, do you trust in me? Do you trust in a physician? Do you trust in your title, your money, your position, your whatever, for your deliverance? The Bible says here, no king is saved by the size of his army. No warrior escapes by his great strength. A horse is a vain hope for deliverance, despite all its great strength. It cannot save, but the eyes of the Lord are on those who fear Him and those whose hope is in His unfailing love. So you could be a believer, what we would term a believer. You believe in the shed blood. You believe in Christ as your Savior. You could be an unbeliever. I would certainly not want you to be offended today, because you can begin to learn, and the Bible says that as that word goes forth, that it doesn't return void, that it will accomplish that what it's been set forth to do. This is not about me today. This is hopefully about you. And this is about how can you be encouraged in a time where there is turmoil like we've never seen before. Fears and anxieties. So now I'm going to roll over to this little bit of this teaching here. So let's just talk about this. So I'll put some of these up. So let's zero in on kind of on the Ebola side of this issue, if you will. And first of all, the fears, are they real? The fears, are they real? I think it's overdone, and I believe that it's overplayed. And I pray that I don't come back and eat my words, but I think we're high. There's a lot of hyperbole. Right now, I believe that we can document, there's probably 4,000 plus people that have been infected. I believe it's 4,000 plus that have died from Ebola, but there are about 8,000 that have been documented to have been infected. And so we know the literature shows that it can be deadly in 50 to 90% of the cases. So that's on the high side. I think most of the literature shows that maybe half of the people that contract Ebola potentially can die from Ebola. So you say, wait a minute, I thought you just said, don't be afraid. Is all of the hype about this? Is it hyperbole or is it fact? And now you're telling me that 50% of the people die that catch this. And well, just bear with me. Just bear with me. I made some notes. I think you have to look at, first of all, at transmission. How do you transmit this? I think I'm just going to put another word up here, and I don't know. I mean, I'm going to talk about not only just about its transmission, but how contagious is it really? So, I know I had all those other viruses up there, but it's thought right now that Ebola is incredibly contagious. Literature really doesn't support that. That's not really what the literature supports. Now, that doesn't mean that if someone has Ebola that you should go up and give them a big hug and kiss. So we need to understand that it is contagious, but it really has to be passed through some type of either blood, saliva, semen, vaginal contact, bodily fluids that have to then come in contact either with your mucosal membranes or a cut or an open wound. Can Ebola live on inanimate objects or on surfaces on this? Well, it's the best I could find, maybe 3 to 4 hours. It lives, a couple of hours, it'll live on inanimate objects. So does that mean then if someone with Ebola that just sneezed into their hand and touches that doorknob, that if I walk right behind them and touch them, yes, but then yes, you can transmit that way, but then you have to then put your hands to your nose and to your mouth. So one of the things we'll teach you today is wash your hands frequently. Keep your fingers and your hands out of your mouth. Biting your fingernails is a horribly, horribly bad habit. If for nothing else, the transmission of disease. And you can't put your fingers in your nose, finger in your mouth. You've got to be very careful about hand-mouth contact. Wash your hands frequently. We'll cover that at the end. But the real theme here is, right now, I believe this, pandemonium that is breaking forth. It's all over the newspapers and it's on the news wires. And I mean, we've had questions on it and a lot of fear. It is not a highly, highly contagious disease and disorder. So if you're a healthcare practitioner, you're going to say, I'm going to get onto your live stream, or I'm going to send you an email because you're an idiot. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't you see that 4,000, well, let back up. Just hold on. Right now, if you're listening to this a year from now, it'll be a dated show, but the one individual that was in America that was documented to have Ebola, I believe his name was Duncan, or I'm not sure, had come from Liberia, an endemic area that has huge, huge issues. This is where the bulk of these numbers come from. And that individual right now, it's believed that as he traveled and in the Dallas area, I believe, up to 50 people have had some direct close contact. And as of the airing of this live stream, there have been no indications that he has transmitted that. So I want to allay fears that if someone has Ebola, that if they walk into the room and you were in the same room, you catch Ebola. That's really it's not what the literature says. It is deadly if you contract it, but it is not as highly contagious as some of the other viruses, like infectious mononucleosis and so on. It is not as highly contagious. That's really not what the literature states. I believe that if you went to the CDC's website, and I didn't go to the CDC because I know basically what their perspective would be, and their perspective would be very aggressive and run for the hills, and I'm not real sure that's the message we need to be sending. Transmission, how do you transmit? It has to be through some type of fluid or intimate contact. It can be on surfaces, but it lives for a short window of time. But then you must literally transmit to some mucosal membrane, mucosal tissue, open cut wound. That's why if you've got cuts on your hand and scrapes and you have fingernails or your fingertips that split and they're very dry, we need to get them covered and healed up. And keep your fingers and keep your hands out of your mouth because these are some key issues. Okay. Transmission. in its initial, someone has Ebola. Here's basically what, extracting from literature, what it says. If someone has it and they are positive, in its initial, first of all, you can only, I don't want to say you can only catch it, but you can catch it more than likely from someone that is already severely ill. It seems as though as it progresses, the first day or two, couple days, maybe even a week or so, they've got a fever. Yes, you can still transmit it, but it's nowhere nearly as contagious. So it becomes more contagious the farther an individual is into the number of days with disease. Make sense? So in other words, the incubation period can be up to 21 days from the time that you're exposed to the time that you start to begin to exhibit symptoms. You get a fever, you feel run down, you feel tired, now you become flu-like, now you become gravely ill. You can't get out of bed, you're bedridden, you ache everywhere, your fever's off of the chart. You are very, very ill. At these stages is where you see a much higher incidence of being highly contagious. Dead bodies. Someone passes from Ebola. Now, and again, I don't want to make this whole thing about Ebola, but I feel like I have no choice because that's what's on the skillet right now. That's what's hot, if you will. And this is where the fears, because there's a lot of fear mongering. You've still got to use wisdom, but I don't believe there's the issues that we're seeing. Now, so you're saying, wait a minute, so how do I know if someone has? Well, if they're deathly ill for 2 weeks, I mean gravely ill, and their organs are breaking down and shutting down, that's a very ill person. That person needs to be quarantined. Here's the problem. If you look at areas like Liberia, and I believe Monrovia and
Monroeville.
Not Monroeville, but the areas and then the one portion of the Congo over there, we have to see that. I mean, we literally have open sewage. In some areas, it's in a very, very poor, extremely poor area. The average dollar spent on healthcare from the best literature that I can find is in essence $100 a year for healthcare. So you have not because it's a poor population that there's an issue here, but we have very, very poor sanitation. Number one, you have poor health care. Now, why is that a problem? Because then any healthcare provider, in many cases, is not even just wearing gloves, masks. They're not taking appropriate procedures to protect themselves from becoming a carrier or contracting and then re-spreading to someone else. So if you really look at the areas where that 4,000 and that have died and 8,000 that have had the disease, so you're at a 50% death rate, if you will, has been in areas where the healthcare and maybe the health of the individuals, and then we want to roll this back to the immune system of the individuals, is highly suspect. The immune systems, poverty-stricken areas, poor dietary components, sewage, open sewage, not a real healthy environment for maintaining the spread of disease and so on. Okay, so just trying to think. I want to make sure that we cover some other areas. Well, let's just jump over to some of the other viruses. Let's just talk about some other viruses real quick before we go to a break, and then we'll come back and wrap some things. But okay, so you could develop mono, right? You could be positive for Epstein-Barr viral titers and have developed chronic fatigue syndrome, and not that I believe it's completely from Epstein-Barr viral titers and so on. But the general theme is here, the transmission of viruses, hand, mouth, even with mono, you have to be using someone else's toothbrush or drinking off of their glass or cup, or I mean, you have to be in kissing, you have to be in close, pretty intimate exchange. We need to be very, very careful when our kids go off to college in their dorm rooms about who's using their glasses and do they ever wash them with hot water and soap and water. We have to be very, very careful about who we're hanging around with and is someone ill and the potential for them to spread it to us. So you have to see whether it's CMV, whether it's EBV, infectious mononucleosis, these viral titers, we all are highly susceptible. Now the problem is that when you have viruses, because of a virus's ability to mutate, see, you can't, believe me, if medicine could, they'd be looking to attempt to vaccinate against you. But it's very, very difficult to develop vaccines in these areas. And right now, there's even discussions about, as of right now, is there an answer for Ebola? So if someone contracts Ebola, can they stop it? And the answer is necessarily no. We have no antidote, no antibiotic. Antibiotics are not effective against a virus. We technically have no antiviral that we know of, or no vaccine that could somehow shut this down. So what it really then comes down to, in my mind, will be, how does your immune system react, respond, and what does it do? And we're going to talk about some key areas of that. So here, I contract one of these. So what are the symptoms? I get mono, I'm wiped out. I can't move for 3 or 4 days, maybe even weeks. I sleep all the time because the immune system is very much under intense stress. Intense stress. When your immune system is that, remember, your immune system has 2 key parameters. Not only does it defend you against virus, bacteria, TB, which is a bacterium, tuberculosis, etc., but it also is involved in repair. It helps your body to repair, to restore. So God built our immune system with a duality, a dual nature, one about defense, one about repair. So obviously when the defense system becomes overwhelmed, your repair system obviously gets put on the back burner, and there's a huge problem. So when folks contract these types of viral issues, rest, bed rest, fluids, immune support, all become very, very critical. Why? Because your body is in a battle. So now let's go back. Why would some folks that contract Ebola or the Ebola virus, and they have specific names for it, which I'm not going to get into, but and first of all, if you look back, it was believed some of this could have emanated or been, or certainly we see some transmission through animals. So we're not, I didn't do enough research to have real strong details. I don't know what value that is to bring that up. But you need to understand that even monkey, pigs, and so on, there's been components or viruses similar to this in nature as their activity. But when I brought up that 4 and then the 8,000, at least that we know of right now, the 4,000 deaths, 8,000 cases that we know of, and then now how the CDC is projecting that there will be 1.4 million. And then I read literature and look at studies that do the analysis on that from statisticians and basically say you can't project this number. And the reason is because if you look at the epidemic areas, Liberia, that their sanitation, their understanding of how to decrease the spread, how to protect yourself, healthcare workers, unless now they're being educated, but during this initial scenario, even as they passed, folks even passed away, there were individuals that were taking no precautions from a protective mechanism. Or near death is when an Ebola victim becomes the most highly contagious, because now their body's overrun with this virus, the body is shut down. But the real key is what the statistician said, you can't project like that. And this, hopefully, as this has moved even to the U.S., that you have better healthcare scenarios. You have folks with gowns, with masks. Just the overall approach is significantly improved, as opposed to where this has started in the Congo, the Gulf Coast Congo, Liberia, where we really don't have. When you talk about spending $100 a year per person on health care, I mean, honestly, I take more than that in supplements in probably 2 weeks. So you have to understand that there is a very poor understanding of how an individual deals with some of their health issues, and especially something that is spread through physical and human contact. So far, what do we have? Is it as aggressively contagious as it's purported to be? There might be folks that would listen to this and watch this that would disagree. That's really not what the literature shows. Is it contagious? Yes. Should we have some concoctions of like having like Star Wars garb on, and that anybody that we should be walking through airports with masks? I mean, that's almost like Hollywood-esque in approach, and I really don't believe we have a situation like that. But nonetheless, it brings us and will bring us, as we go to a break here in a minute, it'll bring us to a greater understanding of the importance of your immune system. How active is your immune system? Are there nutrients that you can use to ramp up your immune system? So we're not going to stand here and say, God forbid, that we have a cure for it. We don't have a cure for Ebola. I mean, that's not what we're saying here. We're saying, how can you support the immune system? What can you do to rebalance the immune system? What can you do to make yourself an unfriendly host to these viruses? Why do some people contract tuberculosis and they've been exposed? Why does another individual that has had the same exposure not contract tuberculosis? When we go after this break, when we come back from this break, we're going to talk a little bit about that and what some of the literature can say about large arabinogalactanes, about what your levels of vitamin D, about what we can do, oleopurin, olive oil extracts. What are some things that you could be doing to just boost your immune system? 1,3-beta-glucans. What can you be doing to support your system through a time? Again, I don't believe that we just throw up our hands and say, who cares, whatever happens, que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be. No, you still need to take precautions. But I think the fears, the way we're approaching this is somewhat overdone at this point in time. We're going to slip to a break. Stay with us to be just a couple of minutes. We'll be back, and we're going to wrap up the whole Ebola and the whole virus situation. Stay with us. Welcome back to our live stream. I just double-checked even right now just to see some of the information, because I never really looked at the CDC's website just to see what they had to say. And I believe that so far the CDC is a little extreme, but they have not, I don't think they've taken a crazy stance toward this. This is why I think you have to be very, very careful what you see in the media, what you're hearing in the media, what many of us just read in the newspaper. You've kind of got to get your facts. So if you missed the first part of this live stream, you need to go back and view what we talked about. How do you transmit bodily fluids, open wounds, cuts, intimacy of contact, saliva to saliva. I'm in contact with someone that is infected with blood-borne or mucus secretions, etc., or sexual contact, and then I am in contact with my mucosal membrane. So this is not, again, this is not some Star Wars type thing. If someone walks into a room, you're going to catch it because they have Ebola. Okay, so you need to understand that. And I think this is where everybody needs to just like tone it down, because I think a lot of this has been trumped up in the media, and there's tremendous angst and fear that's out there. So what do we do? Why are some folks that are exposed to the tuberculosis bacterium, why are some folks that are exposed to the virus that triggers infectious mononucleosis, even Ebola? Now, I mentioned it, from the best guesstimations that around 50 people have been in direct contact with the individual. My left over here, am I still centered? About 50 or so folks that have been in contact with the man that's in the States that they have not developed. Now, certainly there's an incubation period, but they have not contracted. So why? Why? In other words, not everybody that is exposed in all, I could put up tons of different viruses, and I just picked TB because TB is another one of those very, very horrible Now, this is a bacterium, infectious issues that can, people die from TB, or can severely affect your health long term. So you've got viruses, you've got bacterium, but my whole point is, why do some people that are exposed contract, and why do others not contract? And I think that's the big question here. And I think the big question comes down to the individual, your host immune defense systems, the state of your, we have State of the Union addresses. What is the state of your immune defense? What is the state of your immune/defense repair system? What is going on in our body? So, just a couple of quick notes that I want to just run through quickly that gives you a little bit of an idea. In type 2 diabetics, this journal comes out of the Journal of Microbial Infectious Disease in 2014, and it says that vitamin D supplementation promotes macrophages, anti-mycobacteria. See, TB is a mycobacterium, okay? And there are specific macrophages that can be upregulated against mycobacteria. It says that the chances for a diabetic to contract a mycobacterium infection is anywhere from 2.4 times up to 8 times as likely versus someone that is a non. Now that is startling. But guess what they found could bring it back down to more of a 1-to-1 component if they were a diabetic. Vitamin D. The role of vitamin D has been implicated in the growth control of Mycobacterium tuberculosis during primary infection through the induction of certain antimicrobial peptides. In the study, they look at how these antimicrobial peptides, these precursor proteins, stimulate the microbial activity of your macrophages against mycobacterium. You say, wait a minute, I'm only concerned about reading about all this Ebola and mononucleosis, but even though these are two different areas, you have to see that the body utilizes the otherwise everybody would get a virus every single time they were exposed to it. Does that make sense? So your immune system certainly can be ramped up and be geared to defend you. Journal of Hepatology, just a couple quick examples. I have a bunch of them. I can't get into all of them. Journal of Hepatology, 2013, the October edition shows that low serum vitamin D, is associated with high levels of hepatitis B viral replication in chronically infected patients. Vitamin D is an important immune modulator. How many times have you heard me use that word? That plays an emerging role in inflammatory and metabolic liver diseases, including infections with Hep C. Now, Hep C is very, very, now we're over to the viruses again, all right? So I'm jumping pages. I went from mycobacteriums, which are bacterium. Now I jump back over to viruses, and there's a reason. I wanted to prove a point that D, just as one example, and we're going to talk about large arabinogalactanes, we're going to talk about immune stimulants. So please, don't go around telling anybody that, I have a cure for viruses, because then, the wrath of the CDC and the FDA is coming down on me. That's not what this is about. This is to teach you, to educate you how you can support yourself, protect yourself, first of all, to allay fears. Number two, get your immune system functioning where it needs to be so that you are able to defend yourself. Hepatitis C. So you can contract Hep A. You can contract hepatitis B. Now, these are more through foodborne or sewage. So these two components are a little bit different in exposure. Get into your system. Hep C is very much different because these actually have a shorter term. They can run their course. Hep C can affect your body and actually lie dormant for years. This you can get real sick from initially. This one you may not necessarily, and this might show up 20 years later. Once your immune system is weakened, compromised, broken down. So we're back to the virus again. So this is not going to be all about vitamin D, but these are the ones that I just have some quick information for you. And it says that in contrast, the relationship between vitamin D metabolism and chronic hepatitis B is less well characterized. In other words, they've already shown that someone with Hep C, if they give them or get their vitamin D levels up, they can reduce, now watch this, it's called viral replication or reduced viral loads. Now again, this is not a cure. This is just showing that when I ramp up my D status, hepatitis V, hepatitis C, instead of it continuing to multiply and the viral loads, that when the D levels are more efficient, your body's immune system is modulated. It's functioning for you. Their conclusion was low vitamin D serum levels are associated with high levels of hepatitis B viral replication in patients. Inverse seasonal fluctuations. In other words, if you're in the winter and your vitamin D levels drop, typically that there's a functional relationship. As your D levels drop, the growth of hepatitis B viral replication goes up. Very, very one-to-one relationship. Is it the cure? If someone has Ebola, should they just start taking thousands of units of vitamin D? That's not what this discussion's about. This is to educate you, to encourage you, to get you more prepared. That's telling you specifically that you need to have adequate vitamin D levels. Differential pathways regulating the innate and adaptive anti-tumor response in a soluble yeast-derived beta-glucan. So what I did was I just pulled up a couple products that we recommend, and one of them is, from a basic immune standpoint, is a prep called Wholemune. We're going to be relabeling and renaming these very, very soon, but this Wellmune, standardized, this is a standardized WGB component, 75% beta-glucans, and that's what this article is about. Now, just before someone gets a little uptight that we're just pulling information out of the sky, this appeared in the Journal of Blood. So this was done in affiliation with the Departments of Oncology, Departments of Microbiology and Immunology, University of Louisville, School of Medicine, the Institute of Medicine at Tokyo, Molecular Genetics at the University of Kentucky. Beta-glucans have been reported to function as a potent adjuvant to stimulate the innate and adaptive immune responses. However, beta-glucans may differ in their source, their differential in structure. You've got to confirm their biological activity. So what we see is in these beta-glucans, what they're saying is, depending upon where they're sourced from, you can buy cheap beta-glucans all over the internet. If you have lessened activity. So just because it's a beta-glucan doesn't mean it's effective. What's the source? And simply, this is simply saying, now they use the word anti-tumor response, so you have to see this as immune enhancing, immune supporting, and it's fairly simple. That the beta-glucans are stimulatory, and you saw the words, to the innate, that's the God-given immune system, and then adaptive immune system. In other words, here I am functioning, I'm exposed to something. How does my body adapt? How does it deal with the difficulties or with the virus that I've been exposed to? Beta-glucans help not only the innate, God-given, but also how you adapt. So why not, through the course of the winter, you need to have a 25 OHD level done. Been talking to you about that forever, of vitamin D, 25 OHD. Why don't we get you on some of this Wholemune? Oh, you just want to sell me product? No, not really. I take it myself. Why? Because I want to have my immune system bolstered. Remember, we have no cure. If your child develops mono, your child develops, oh, God forbid, Ebola. I mean, we have no, you understand that we have no cure. We have no antidote for these components. We don't. So why would we not want to stimulate the innate, God-given immune system, the adaptive immune system? How does it respond when under duress? Can I boost it? Can I support it? We know that we've got two good sources, the right sources, because it's got to be a large arabinogalactane source from a beta-glucan. You got to get your vitamin D levels up to where they need to be. Vitamin D deficiency reduces the immune response, intracellular rate of microglial cells, even talking about antimicrobial peptides and T cells again. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, I have tons of literature here. Innate resistant, Journal of Complementary Pathology, 2014. Innate resistance to tuberculosis in man, cattle, and laboratory animal models, nipping the disease in the bud. Nipping the disease in the bud. Nip in the bud, right? And so that's an old phrase that we've used, an old axiom that we've nip it in the bud. Deal with a problem before it becomes a huge, huge problem. If there's strife in your home or there's strife in the workplace or amongst your employees or your colleagues, you need to deal with it. Why? You need to try to nip it in the bud. What's the same? Same thing. Tuberculosis does not always develop in people or cattle exposed to the disease, and some exposed individuals may not exhibit evidence of the infection. Such variability in the susceptibility. We want to reduce your susceptibility to viruses and disease, right? That's what this is about. Variability and susceptibility may be mediated through host innate immunity, word comes up again, non-specific inflammatory responses that may successfully eliminate infection. So now I want to go back. You say, wait a minute, but you were talking about tuberculosis again. You're not talking about Ebola. But why do, from the literature, why do 50% die? And some literature shows that it's even higher. We're just going to say, we'll say 50, 60%. 1 in 2 die. Why do some of them survive? Haggard and beaten, certainly, but why do some? Because it has to be that their innate and their adaptive immune systems were intact. And even though they contracted, so we're talking about susceptibility, but also about once you've contracted, can your immune system defend and fight off? Just want to see if I can pull, there was another note here. Assessing the evidence from research in man, cattle, and laboratory animals, we appraise the role of innate immunity in TB. We look at macrophages, neutrophils, lymphocytes, natural kill cellars, endogenous host compounds. Okay, these are all compounds that literally the role of your immune system. And in particular, how does vitamin D play a role? So again, I could go on. I've got more here and I don't want to. So here's what I'm going to tell you. How do we, as we wrap this, how do we become less susceptible and then have an adapted immune system? First of all, you need to have, Josiah, we're even talking at the break. We're going to do more with even essential oils. We have some essential oils. We're just so busy doing so many different things, we just never pursue it. But real pure essential oils have incredible antibacterial and antiviral-like activities. We have a whole line of organic and good soaps. We need to use them. You need to be using them regularly. You need to wash your hands 30 seconds under warm water, literally scrubbing your hands 30 seconds with soap. Try not to use these antibacterial soaps because all we find is bacteria and so on and viruses mutate the more they are exposed to antibacterial soaps. You do not need them. You need clean. Our organic soap line, I use it everywhere. It's everywhere in my house. My shower, my bathroom upstairs. I take a shower downstairs. It's everywhere. It's a glycerin-based. It's 85% organic. I mean, I use our hand pump soaps. Use them. You've got to use them. Don't use these antibacterial things because the more you use them, the more resistances we're developing. So you've got to make sure that you keep your hands clean. You've got to keep your hands out of your mouth, out of your nose, and we need to teach our children to do the same thing. If you're out, you've been out, you've gone to the store, you've gone to the grocery store. Hey, when I go to the grocery store, I wipe those handles off because I'm touching food, and I'm not neurotic about those things, but I wipe those handles off of the buggy, right? Absolutely. Why? Because now I'm going in there, I'm picking organic apples up, and I'm picking up fruits, and I'm buying, and I got my hands all over this stuff, and I just touched the handle on the cart that someone could have just sneezed and coughed right into their hand, put their hand on the handle, right? That's something that Josiah would do. But no, seriously, the J. But seriously, Just use wisdom. Wipe the handles off. Now, that doesn't mean every time we walk through a door that you need to go wash your hands. I don't want you to develop a compulsive disorder. But what you need to know is you need to be very, very careful. Now, if you're out and you're doing these things and now you're going to go get something to eat, go wash your hands. Wife and I were at Whole Foods last Sunday. We left church. We were going to go get something to eat. And I said, before we start shopping, let's grab one of their omelets. I was hungry. I left the house late. I went into their bathroom and washed my hands. Came out and ate. Just simplistic. So why, when I contrast what's happening in Liberia, we just don't have that knowledge and understanding. You do have the knowledge and the understanding. Run with it. Keep your hands, keep your mouth, nose clean. Make sure that you have on your furnaces in your home as we approach winter seasons, make sure that you have some type of, I have an April air unit on my house that literally adds humidification back. Why? Because the drier your nasal passages are, the more susceptible they become. So those are some basic tips. If you're under a lot of stress, we need to help your stress response. If you're not sleeping, we need to get you to sleep. If you have a child or your spouse has a very extreme diet, you eat one meal a day, bad news. We've got to get you on a daily essential. You've got to let zinc and L-selenomethionine and vitamin A work for you from an immune standpoint. Basic, remember, innate and then adaptive immune response. That's what we're after. So we can do that by basic support. All right, what about your buffered C? What about just having buffered C in you morning? I dose it during the day when I'm at work here, and then again at night when I go home. Buffered vitamin C. What about something like NK Stim? Now, why is this? And again, we're going to be relabeling all these, but why? It's got those large arabinogalactanes in it. It has a standardized allopurin level, which is an olive leaf extract, and an aloe concentrate, literally to stimulate your natural killer cell production. This is not pie in the sky. This is not something that we've just pulled out. There's literature to support. Now again, this is not to be used for a cure to some viral thing that you have, but just the last couple of days, my wife became ill. I started to get a little bit of a scratchy throat. I've got some things going on. I'm taking Virusid, NK Stim, tons of C, taking my normal doses of D. Why? I'm trying to, all right, I already became susceptible upon exposure to some degree. My immune system didn't deal with it immediately, but then that doesn't mean I drop my hands and I give in. I'm going to keep ramping my immune system so that it's more adapted and that it helps me. Then you've got the Virusid, which I love. Virusid has astragalus, great natural immune support, blackberry, elderberry extracts, Androphagus paniculata, quality forms of echinacea. I mean, so what? A little bit of zinc, a little bit of A. So what you're seeing here, remember, combination prep. So if you start to get a head cold, a viral component, you're picking up the flu, Virusid. It's amazing. We're going to rename this to Virustat, by the way, but soon it'll be up on the site. Your vitamin D, you need to be on adequate levels of vitamin D. I don't know what else to say. Get a vitamin D level done. You move into the winter. I easily do 5,000 units a day personally myself in through the winter. A lot of talk. I understand some people have been shut down. Their websites shut down because they've mentioned things like ionic colloidal silvers and so on. And I don't normally talk much about this, but I will tell you, I start to get a virus. I don't have a problem with using that. I don't have a problem with I don't use that on a regular basis, and neither would I recommend that. But under acute situations, we've got to ramp your immune system. So first, minimize your exposures, okay? Number two, reduce your exposure through your own contact of where you've been. We've got to get you to sleep well. I mean, there's just some basic things. How do we eat? Do we skip meals? Am I under a lot of stress? Is my immune system going to be damaged? If I'm under a lot of stress and I don't eat well, then I better be supplementing. I better be taking some Virusid even as a maintenance, this NK Stim as a maintenance. I mean, I moved it again. He's trying to get some shots of these. Sorry about that. So here we go. Let me just move these over there again. So, did I get them?
Get the display out
so
for us.
make sure that you just see that there are some things that you can do. I think in summary, should I be fearful and running to the hills because of all this talk of viruses? No. Do I think that they're going to make a movie of this, the attack of the Ebola virus and how cities and communities are wiped out? I don't believe so. Unfortunately, in the west coast of Africa, the Congo, and I mean, we know that bats actually are harbingers of these components. So somehow it's being transmitted somehow through the animal kingdom to humans. Be careful about your contact with animals. But the key is in areas where there's no real understanding of how disease is transmitted. You do have that understanding. We're very fortunate because of our healthcare system in the United States that we understand that, and we reduce our exposures by reducing our direct physical contact. And I don't believe that. This is why when there's projections in the healthcare community that it could go to 1.4 million and above, I don't know. I'm not real sure how they're coming up with that. I'm not real sure. And I think if they employ better healthcare measures, we will greatly reduce the spread and transmission. But ultimately, you've got to be doing some things that just support you, not just the transmission. All right. Thanks for being with us. Am I back over here yet? All right. All right. It went longer than I wanted to. I thought this one was going to be quick and to the point, and obviously we babbled a little bit. But lastly, as I talked about even on our radio broadcast this morning, who are you putting your weight down onto? Is it just in your physician? Is it just in naturopathic and holistic concepts? Is it in your governments? What I would say to you, who you really ultimately have to put your weight down onto is him. This is all good, and this is here to help you and encourage you. But if I would be totally remiss, and I don't know where you are, and would have no idea, but I would be totally remiss if I didn't drive you back to the one that is in charge of everything. It says, no king is saved by the size of his army, no warrior escapes by his great strength. A horse is a vain hope for deliverance, and despite all of its great strength, it cannot save. But the eyes of the Lord are on those who fear him, on those whose hope is in his unfailing love, to deliver them from death and to keep them alive in famine. Deliver them from death, keep them alive in famine. Wait a minute, the Bible says that someday I'm going to die, don't we? Yes. Well, you see, eternally, that's really what our focus should be on. This is a temporal, physical body that is unfortunately wasting away daily. But eternity, see, because when you're trusting in him, your eternity is sealed. See, you have life forever. We can't that's infinity. We don't understand what that means. We're finite beings functioning in a finite world with finite surroundings, not God. We wait in hope for the Lord. He's our help and our shield. In him our hearts rejoice, for we trust in his holy name. May your unfailing love be with us, Lord, as we put our hope in you. And then I just want to read you very quickly out of the book of Revelations. I discussed this as well on the early morning broadcast. And this is John having the I am the first and the last. Now you can choose to believe this or believe this is some hyperbole. But I believe if you just listen and you receive this with an open mind. He says, for I am the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega. He's described many times as the Alpha and the Omega. I am the living one, eternally living forever. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever. See, so as he transposed death and overcame death, as you accept him, you have life forevermore. This carnal life, this physical life is going to go. And we're afraid of Ebola virus and all that good stuff. We want a movie beyond that. And I hold the keys of death and Hades. Write now, therefore, what you have seen, what is now and what will take place later. the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands, and the stars of the angels in the 7 churches. I hold the keys of death and Hades. Write what you've seen. I am alive forever and ever. God bless you. Thanks for being with us today. I hope you learned something. I hope it set some of your fears at ease. If it hasn't, get into this right here. This is where your strength comes from. God bless you once again. Thanks for being with us. I have no idea what's on tap for next time, but open house next week, October 18th. Obviously, if you're listening to this after October 18th, but hey, open house, come. If you're local tri-state area, if not, you go to the website. We will be live streaming from roughly 2 to 4 on that day, October 18th. Get a flavor. We're going to have some local radio stations that are going to be here actually broadcasting from here to the whole entire. This station goes into like 5-6 states, for goodness sake. It's a huge station here in the Pittsburgh area. They're going to be here just kind of getting the feel for the craziness that we'll have going on. I'll be here. Tune in. Josiah, Dante, we'll have some guests on. God bless you. Go with him. He'll never disappoint you. I promise you that. Thanks for tuning in.